The courtroom at 111 Center Street was so quiet that every shuffle of paper sounded like an accusation. Emily Whitmore stood at the respondent's table with her hands folded, a borrowed blazer hanging a little loose on her shoulders, her wedding ring conspicuously absent. The gallery behind her was packed with people who didn't belong in a routine custody hearing. A couple of finance reporters, a blogger with a live-stream tripod, and two women from Grant Whitmore's office who looked like they came to watch a show. Grant sat with the ease of a man who believed the room was built for him. Navy suit, perfect tie knot, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. His attorney, Malcolm Pierce, leaned in close and whispered, then straightened like he was about to conduct an orchestra. Across from them, Emily's lawyer was a legal aid attorney named Nora Feldman, a woman with a tired leather briefcase and the restrained look of someone who'd learned not to take the bait. Judge Harriet Lang flipped through the file, then looked over her glasses. "Mr. Pierce, you may proceed." Malcolm rose. "Your Honor, this is not just a custody matter. This is about deception. It's about a woman who built her entire marriage on a lie." Grant's smile widened, like he was watching a stock price tick up. Malcolm lifted a manila folder. "We have documentation showing Mrs. Whitmore concealed significant information about her background, misrepresented her financial history, and gained access to Mr. Whitmore's personal and corporate accounts under false pretenses." Emily didn't move. She kept her eyes on the bench, not on Grant, not on the phones pointed at her. Malcolm continued, voice smooth. "Mr. Whitmore married her believing she was an honest person. Instead, he brought someone into his home who treated him like a target. And now, as he seeks sole custody of their daughter, Mrs. Whitmore has the audacity to present herself as the victim." Grant finally spoke, just loud enough for the microphones near the clerk's station. She knew exactly what she was doing. A ripple went through the gallery. One of the reporters scribbled fast. A phone camera zoomed in on Emily's face, waiting for the crack, the tears, the outburst. Grant turned slightly, making sure she could hear him. "Tell the judge where you're from, Emily. Tell her the truth. Trailer parks don't teach you manners, but maybe court will." Nora Feldman's jaw tightened. "Your Honor," Judge Lang raised a hand. "Mr. Whitmore, you will not address the other party directly." Grant leaned back like the reprimand didn't apply to him. His eyes stayed on Emily, bright with contempt and certainty. Malcolm walked a few steps toward Emily's table, careful to keep his tone courteous while his words cut. "Mrs. Whitmore, isn't it true you used a different last name before you met my client?" Emily's voice was calm. "I used my mother's name." "And why was that?" Malcolm asked. "To hide something." "It was my name," Emily said. Malcolm smiled, like he'd been gifted a punchline. "Your Honor, we have a sworn statement from a former landlord in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It describes Mrs. Whitmore as always behind on rent, always looking for handouts, and always scheming. We also have bank records showing she opened accounts shortly after meeting Mr. Whitmore, then requested access to his household accounts within 6 weeks of their wedding." Grant's attorney placed copies on the clerk's desk with a neat, practiced snap. Judge Lang glanced down, then up. "Ms. Feldman," Nora stood. "Your Honor, much of what opposing counsel has submitted is irrelevant, prejudicial, and based on hearsay. This is a custody hearing. My client has been the primary caregiver since the child was born," Grant cut in, unable to resist. "Because she didn't have a career to go back to." Judge Lang's gaze sharpened. "Mr. Whitmore," Grant lifted his hands. "I'm sorry, Your Honor. It's unbelievable watching her do this, watching her act like she belongs in my world." Emily's posture didn't change. The calm around her wasn't soft. It was deliberate, like a door locked from the inside. Malcolm kept going. "Mr. Whitmore is a managing partner at Whitmore Hale Capital. He can provide stability, private school, a consistent schedule. Mrs. Whitmore, by contrast, has no meaningful employment history, no family support in New York City, and no assets. She has been staying in a sublet under a friend's name." Nora started to object again, but Judge Lang held up a finger, one at a time. Grant glanced at the gallery and then at the cameras, as if offering them a clean ending. "I shouldn't have married her," he said. "I tried to be the good guy. I tried to believe love was enough, but you can't take someone out of nothing and expect them not to drag you down." A low murmur ran through the benches. Emily's face remained still, but her fingers tightened once, subtly, around the strap of her bag. Judge Lang exhaled, the sound of someone who'd heard too many versions of the same story. "Mr. Pierce, you're requesting temporary sole custody and supervised visitation for Mrs. Whitmore?" "Yes, Your Honor," Malcolm said. "Given the pattern of deception, we also request an immediate order limiting her access to marital funds. Mr. Whitmore has reason to believe she's been moving money." Emily's phone vibrated once inside her tote bag. The sound was small, but in the hush of the courtroom, it landed like a signal. Emily didn't reach for it. She didn't even blink. She just sat there, eyes forward, as if she'd expected that exact moment. Nora noticed. Her gaze flicked to the tote, then back to Emily, confused by the lack of panic. Grant noticed, too. His smile faltered, just barely, then returned sharper. "What, Emily?" he said, quieter now. "Texting your friend to find you another couch?" Judge Lang rapped her pen once. "Enough." Malcolm leaned toward the bench. "Your Honor, we'd also like to enter Exhibit 12, an email chain that indicates Mrs. Whitmore sought a meeting with Mr. Whitmore's CFO and requested internal financial statements. That is not something a spouse requests unless she is planning something." Nora shook her head. "She requested information because she was being kept in the dark about household expenses. He was controlling." Grant's laugh was short and mean. "Controlling? I paid for everything. I paid for her mother's medical bills, too, because she was too proud to ask for help and too broke to do it herself." Emily's eyes finally moved, not toward Grant, but down toward the polished wood of the table. The smallest breath left her nose. Not sadness, not fear, something closer to patience. Judge Lang's expression tightened at the mention of medical bills. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm going to ask you to stop editorializing." Grant nodded, but the damage was done. A reporter in the back whispered to another, and a phone camera tracked Emily again, hungry for a reaction. Malcolm took advantage of the momentum. "Your Honor, my client's position is simple. Mrs. Whitmore used this marriage to elevate herself. Now that the marriage is dissolving, she is attempting to extract as much as possible. We ask the court to protect the child and protect Mr. Whitmore from further harm." The words hung in the air. Protect him from her. Judge Lang looked to Nora. "Ms. Feldman, do you have anything to submit in response?" Nora opened her mouth, then hesitated. Her file was thinner than Malcolm's. She had arguments. She had objections. But the courtroom wasn't built for arguments. It was built for proof. Emily's tote bag vibrated again. This time, the screen lit faintly through the fabric, and the corner of the gallery caught it like a flash. Someone leaned forward. Grant's eyes narrowed. He watched Emily like a man watching a locked safe, convinced there was something inside that belonged to him. The courtroom doors opened. Not the casual swing of someone late. The doors opened with purpose, and every head turned because the movement carried weight. Two men in dark suits stepped in first, scanning the room the way private security scanned a hotel lobby before a CEO entered. Behind them walked a woman in a charcoal coat, silver hair pulled back, posture so straight it looked like it was held up by iron. She didn't search the room. She already knew exactly where to go. At her side were three attorneys in tailored suits carrying hard-sided briefcases, and one younger woman with a legal pad and a badge clipped to her belt that read, "Notary Public, New York." The woman stopped just inside the doorway and spoke to the bailiff in a low voice. The bailiff's expression changed, fast, the way it did when someone important said something that couldn't be ignored. Judge Lang looked up, irritated. "Who is that?" Malcolm turned, annoyance on his face. Then his expression shifted, as if someone had punched the air out of him. Grant's posture changed in a way he couldn't hide. His shoulders stiffened, his jaw set. He stared at the woman like she was a ghost walking in broad daylight. Emily stayed seated. Only her eyes lifted. The woman walked forward, heels quiet against the stone floor, and stopped behind Emily's table. She placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, not tender, not theatrical, just steady. Then she looked at the bench. "Good morning, Your Honor," she said. "Diane Reyes. I'm here on behalf of my daughter." Grant's mouth opened slightly, then closed. The smugness that had carried him for the last 20 minutes disappeared, replaced by something raw and uneasy. Malcolm cleared his throat. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." Judge Lang's gaze moved from Diane to the team behind her. "Ms. Reyes, are you an attorney?" Diane's eyes didn't leave the judge. "No, but the people standing behind me are." One of the attorneys stepped forward and spoke with clipped confidence. "Elaine Park, Park & Sutherland, LLP. We're substituting in as counsel for Mrs. Whitmore, effective immediately. Notice has been filed with the clerk." The clerk looked down at a document that had not been there 5 minutes ago. Grant whispered something sharp to Malcolm, but Malcolm didn't answer. He was still staring at Elaine Park like he'd just recognized a name he hoped never to see. Judge Lang's tone went cautious. "Ms. Park, I'm familiar with your firm." Elaine nodded once. "We appreciate the court's time, Your Honor. We're prepared to address the allegations in full, and we have documents that will materially affect today's requests regarding custody and financial access." Grant forced a laugh that sounded wrong even to him. "This is a stunt." Diane Reyes finally looked at him. Her gaze carried no anger, no pleading, just the calm authority of someone who had spent her entire life in rooms where men like Grant tried to control the story. "Grant," she said, using his first name like a verdict. "You've been very loud for a man who hasn't read the contracts he signed." Malcolm Pierce leaned over to Grant, his whisper urgent and fast. "Why didn't you tell me Park & Sutherland was involved? They don't take domestic cases." Grant looked pale, his previous arrogance draining away like water from a cracked glass. "I didn't know," he hissed back. "Her mother lives in Oklahoma. She manages a diner. This is impossible." But the reality was standing right in front of them. 3 top-tier corporate litigators arranging files on Emily's table with the precision of a military operation. The gallery buzzed. Reporters were texting furiously now, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure. This wasn't a custody hearing anymore. It was an ambush. Elaine Park wasted no time. "Your Honor, Mr. Pierce has painted a portrait of my client as a woman of limited means and questionable intent. He claims she has no assets. He claims she married Mr. Whitmore for financial security." Elaine paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. She pulled a thick binder from her briefcase and placed it on the stand. "The truth is simpler. Emily Whitmore, née Reyes, is the sole beneficiary of the Reyes Family Trust, which holds controlling interests in Reyes Logistics, one of the largest private distribution networks in the Midwest. She did not marry Mr. Whitmore for his money. In fact, her personal holdings exceed his by a factor of 4. Grant's face went slack. He stared at Emily, who was still looking forward, her hands clasped on the table. He remembered the times he'd made jokes about her cheap clothes, her simple tastes, the way she clipped coupons. He remembered telling his friends she was low maintenance because she didn't know any better. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She hadn't been poor. She had been observing. She had been careful. And she had been protecting herself from him long before he decided to file for divorce. The humiliation burned hot in his chest, not because he was losing, but because he had been so completely, laughably wrong. Judge Lang picked up the document Elaine had submitted, her eyebrows climbing toward her hairline. "Ms. Park, if this is accurate, why was none of this disclosed in the initial filings?" Elaine's voice was cool, professional. "Because, Your Honor, the assets are held in a blind trust designed to protect the privacy of the beneficiaries. However, Mr. Whitmore's aggressive financial misconduct forced us to unveil the structure early." She turned to look directly at Grant. "We are also submitting evidence that Mr. Whitmore attempted to leverage Emily's credit identity to secure loans for his failing ventures, assuming she wouldn't notice because he believed she was financially illiterate." Malcolm jumped up. "Objection! This is speculation!" Judge Lang didn't even look at him. "Overruled. Continue, Ms. Park." Elaine nodded. "Thank you. We have forensic accounting reports detailing transfers from joint accounts into shell companies registered under Mr. Whitmore's name in Delaware and Nevada. More importantly, we have the prenuptial agreement." Grant blinked. "We didn't sign a prenup," he blurted out. Elaine smiled, a small, dangerous expression. "You signed a business continuity agreement 3 weeks before the wedding, buried in the stack of papers for the house closing. You didn't read it, did you, Grant? You were too busy explaining to Emily how mortgages work." The courtroom was dead silent. Grant's mind raced back to that afternoon in the lawyer's office. He remembered feeling generous, expansive, explaining terms to Emily while she nodded and signed where he pointed. He had been so busy performing the role of the benevolent provider that he hadn't bothered to check what she had slipped into the stack. The irony was suffocating. He had signed away his claim to any marital assets derived from her trust, and worse, he had agreed to a clause that triggered an immediate audit of his own finances in the event of a divorce filing. He had handed her the knife she was now holding to his throat. Diane Reyes stepped forward slightly, her voice low but carrying to the back of the room. "You called my daughter a charity case, Grant. You told the court she came from nothing." She looked at the judge. "My husband started Reyes Logistics with one truck 40 years ago. We taught Emily that money is a tool, not a personality. We taught her to be quiet when fools are talking." She turned her gaze back to Grant. "You mistook her silence for weakness. That was your first mistake. Your second was thinking you could take her daughter away." The words landed with the weight of a final judgment. Grant looked at his attorney, pleading for a lifeline, but Malcolm was busy reading the business continuity agreement, his face gray. Elaine Park closed the binder. "We are requesting a full forensic audit of Whitmore Hale Capital, an immediate freeze on all joint assets, and a dismissal of Mr. Whitmore's petition for sole custody based on demonstrable bad faith." Judge Lang looked at Grant. Her expression hardened. "Mr. Pierce, do you have a response?" Malcolm stammered, flipping through pages he had clearly never seen before. "Your Honor, we need time to review this. This is an ambush." Judge Lang leaned forward. "It seems to be a response to your own ambush, Counselor. Request for audit granted. Assets frozen. We reconvene in 48 hours. She banged the gavel. The sound echoed like a gunshot, signaling the end of Grant's control. Grant stormed out of the courtroom, pushing past a photographer who tried to get a shot of his face. Malcolm Pierce followed close behind, his phone already glued to his ear. "I don't care what time it is. Get the accounting team on the line now," Malcolm snapped. Grant spun around in the hallway, his face flushed. How is this possible? How does she have that kind of money? He wasn't asking Malcolm. He was asking the universe. It didn't make sense. The woman who clipped coupons for laundry detergent, who drove a 5-year-old Honda, who listened to him lecture her about fiscal responsibility. She was a trust fund heiress? It felt like a betrayal of his entire worldview. Back inside the courtroom, Emily hadn't moved. She watched the doors swing shut behind her husband, her face unreadable. Diane placed a hand on her shoulder again. "You okay?" Emily let out a long breath, the tension finally leaving her shoulders. "I just wanted him to sign the papers, Mom. I didn't want this." Diane nodded. "I know, but bullies don't stop because you ask them nicely. They stop when they hit a wall." Elaine Park was already packing up her files, efficient and brisk. "We have the momentum," she said, "but he's going to panic. Panicked men do stupid things. We need to be ready for the backlash." The backlash started 3 hours later. Grant, desperate to regain control of the narrative, went to his office and called an emergency meeting with his partners. But when he swiped his keycard at the elevator bank of Whitmore Hale Capital, the light flashed red. Access denied. He tried again. Red. He looked at the security guard, a man he'd ignored for 5 years. "There's a glitch," Grant said, irritated. The guard didn't look up from his monitor. "No glitch, Mr. Whitmore. HR revoked your clearance 20 minutes ago, pending the external audit." Grant felt a cold sweat break out on his back. They were locking him out of his own company. He pulled out his phone to call his CFO, but a notification popped up first. A tweet from a financial insider account with 500,000 followers. Sources say Whitmore Hale Capital facing massive forensic audit after managing partner Grant Whitmore fails to disclose conflicts of interest in divorce proceedings. Investors urged to review portfolios. The tweet already had thousands of retweets. Grant stared at the screen, his thumb hovering. It wasn't just a legal battle anymore, it was a career execution. He dialed his CFO, straight to voicemail. He dialed his top investor, voicemail. The silence from his network was deafening. Desperate, Grant drove to the bank. If he couldn't get into the office, he'd get cash. He needed liquidity. He marched up to the teller at the downtown Chase branch, trying to project confidence despite the sweat on his forehead. "I need to make a withdrawal," he said, sliding his card over. The teller typed for a moment, then frowned. "I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore. This account has been flagged by the court order. Grant slammed his hand on the counter. "That's a joint account. I put the money in there." The teller took a step back. "Sir, please lower your voice. The freeze applies to all accounts associated with your Social Security number." He walked out of the bank, feeling like the ground was dissolving. He sat in his luxury SUV. The lease was up next month, he suddenly remembered, and stared at the steering wheel. He had no access to his accounts, no access to his office. His reputation was bleeding out on Twitter. And Emily, quiet, simple Emily, was somewhere in the city with a team of lawyers he couldn't afford to fight. He pulled up her contact info, his thumb hovering over the call button. He wanted to scream at her, to beg her, to threaten her, but he knew, with a sinking dread, that she wouldn't answer. She was done listening. That evening, Grant tried the only card he had left: public sympathy. He sat in his living room, set up a ring light, and recorded a video for Instagram. He wore a casual sweater, trying to look relatable and broken. "I don't usually do this," he started, his voice thick with fake emotion. "But I'm being targeted. My wife, she's not who I thought she was. Her family has immense power, and they're using it to crush me, to take my daughter, to destroy my business. I'm just a regular guy fighting a corporate machine." He posted it, captioning it, "Father's Rights, Justice for Grant." Within minutes, the comments started rolling in, some supportive, but many asking about the audit. Emily watched the video from a hotel suite uptown. She sat on the edge of the bed, her phone in her hand. Diane sat in the armchair across from her, reading a book. "He's playing the victim," Emily said quietly. "He's good at it." Diane turned a page. "Let him. When you wrestle with a pig, you both get dirty, but the pig likes it. Let him scream. We have the documents." Emily looked at the screen, at the face of the man she had once loved, the man who had made her feel small for years. "He looks scared," she said. Diane closed her book. "He should be. We haven't even released the emails yet." The next morning, the internet had turned Grant's video into a meme, but not the way he intended. People were dissecting his background, finding the inconsistencies. But the real blow came at 10 a.m. Grant was sitting in Malcolm's conference room, refreshing his feed, when a new headline dropped on a major business news site. "Leaked emails reveal Whitmore Hale Capital funneled investor funds to personal accounts." Grant froze. The article detailed everything: the consulting fees paid to non-existent firms, the travel expenses that were actually family vacations he took without Emily, the loans taken out in her name. Malcolm walked in, looking like he hadn't slept. He threw a stack of papers on the table. "Did you see it?" Grant nodded, mute. "It gets worse," Malcolm said, sitting down heavily. "The Bar Association just called. They're opening an inquiry into my conduct for filing false statements based on your information. Grant, you told me she was indigent. You told me those debts were hers." Grant looked up, eyes wide. "They were. I put them in her name." Malcolm stared at him with pure disgust. "That's fraud, Grant. That's federal wire fraud." Grant's phone started ringing. It was his mother. He ignored it. Then his sister. Ignored. Then a number he didn't recognize. He answered. "Mr. Whitmore," a voice said. "This is Detective Miller from the NYPD Financial Crimes Task Force. We'd like you to come down to the station to answer some questions regarding a complaint filed by Reyes Logistics." Grant dropped the phone. It clattered onto the mahogany table. "They want me to come in," he whispered. Malcolm stood up and started packing his briefcase. "You need a criminal defense attorney, Grant. I do family law. I can't help you with this." Grant grabbed Malcolm's arm. "You can't leave me. I paid you a retainer." Malcolm pulled his arm away. "That retainer is gone, burned through in the last 48 hours of damage control, and frankly, I'm not going down with you." Malcolm walked out, leaving Grant alone in the glass-walled conference room. The city skyline loomed outside, indifferent. Grant looked at the view he used to think he owned. Now, it looked like a prison. He had no lawyer, no money, and the police were waiting. He tried to run. Not physically. He knew they'd catch him at the airport. But legally. He called an old friend from college who worked in offshore banking. "Dave, I need a favor. I need to move some assets. Fast." There was a long pause on the other end. "Grant, are you serious?" Dave asked. "My compliance officer just sent out a memo with your name on it." You're radioactive. If I touch your money, I lose my license. Don't call me again." The line went dead. The walls were closing in, inch by inch. Grant decided to go to Emily. He had to convince her. She was soft. She had always been soft. He drove to the sublet where he thought she was staying, banging on the door until a terrified stranger opened it. "She's not here," the woman yelled. "She left months ago." Grant stood on the sidewalk, panting. He realized he didn't even know where his wife and daughter were. He had never bothered to ask about her friends, her support system. He had assumed she had none. He was alone in a city of 8 million people. The deposition was scheduled for the next day, but it turned into a surrender. Grant walked into the conference room at Park and Sutherland, looking like a man who had aged 10 years in 2 days. Elaine Park sat at the head of the table, flanked by forensic accountants. Emily sat next to her, looking serene. "Mr. Whitmore," Elaine began, "we are prepared to hand over this entire file to the district attorney. The fraud, the identity theft, the embezzlement, unless you agree to our terms immediately." Grant slumped in his chair. "What terms?" he croaked. Elaine slid a document across the table. "Full legal and physical custody of your daughter to Emily. You renounce all parental rights. You agree to a lifetime restraining order. You liquidate your remaining personal assets to repay the loans taken in Emily's name, and you issue a public retraction of your statements." Grant looked at the paper. It was a death sentence for his life as he knew it. He looked at Emily. "Em, please. I'm your husband." Emily finally spoke. Her voice was steady, clear, and devoid of the fear he used to feast on. "You were never a husband, Grant. You were a warden, and I'm not your inmate anymore." She didn't look away. "Sign the papers, or my mother calls the DA herself." Grant looked at the pen. He looked at the accountants, the lawyers, the mountains of evidence. He realized with clarity that the woman he belittled had completely outmaneuvered him. He picked up the pen. His hand shook as he signed his name, ending the war he had started. The sentencing hearing 6 months later was a formality, but the press was there anyway. Grant Whitmore, formerly of Whitmore Hale Capital, stood before a federal judge, not for custody this time, but for wire fraud and identity theft. He looked smaller in his cheap suit, the arrogance completely eroded. The plea deal had kept him out of maximum security, but he was still facing 30 months in a minimum security facility, followed by 5 years of probation and restitution that would take him a lifetime to pay off. The judge's words were sharp. "You used intimacy as a weapon for financial gain. It is a particularly despicable form of theft." Emily wasn't in the courtroom. She didn't need to be. She was in a conference room in Chicago, sitting at the head of a table at Reyes Logistics. She had taken a position on the board, using her background in operations, the background Grant had mocked as blue-collar, to streamline their supply chain. She wore a tailored suit that fit perfectly, her hair cut in a sharp bob. She looked powerful. When her phone buzzed with the news of the sentencing, she glanced at it, swiped the notification away, and turned back to the meeting. "Let's move to the Q3 projections," she said. Grant's downfall was total. His partners had sued him. His friends had abandoned him. Even his family had distanced themselves to avoid the scandal. He was alone. As the bailiff led him away in handcuffs, he looked back at the gallery, perhaps hoping for one friendly face. There was none. Only the sketch artist, capturing the slump of his shoulders, and a few reporters already bored with the story. The charismatic genius of Wall Street was just another inmate number now. In the months that followed, Emily rebuilt her life with a vengeance. She bought a brownstone in Brooklyn, not with trust money, but with her own salary. She enrolled her daughter in a progressive school where kindness was valued over status. She started a foundation to help women recover from financial abuse, providing them with legal aid and forensic accounting services. She named it the Reyes Initiative. It was her way of turning her scars into armor for others. One afternoon, a letter arrived at her office. It was from prison. The envelope was cheap, the handwriting shaky. Emily stared at it for a long time. It was from Grant. She didn't open it. She didn't need to know if he was sorry, or if he was blaming her, or if he was asking for money. It didn't matter. His voice no longer had a place in her head. She dropped the unopened letter into the shredder by her desk and watched the paper turn into confetti. It was the most satisfying sound she had ever heard. Diane Reyes visited a few weeks later. They sat on Emily's terrace, drinking iced tea, watching the city sunset. "You look good," Diane said. "You look like yourself again." Emily smiled. "I feel like myself. For a long time, I thought I had to be small to fit in his world. I forgot that I have my own world." Diane nodded. "Never shrink yourself for someone who refuses to grow. That's the lesson." Emily looked at her daughter playing in the garden below. "He underestimated us, Mom. That was his only real crime. The rest was just details." The story of Grant Whitmore became a cautionary tale in the financial district, a warning about hubris and the dangers of underestimating a partner. But for Emily, it was just history. She was no longer the respondent or the victim. She was Emily Reyes, a mother, a businesswoman, and a survivor. She had walked through the fire of humiliation and come out carrying the torch. As the sun dipped below the skyline, Emily picked up her daughter, who had run up with a scraped knee. "It's okay," Emily whispered, kissing the top of her head. "It hurts now, but it will heal. You're strong. You come from strong women." The little girl nodded, wiping her eyes. Emily looked at the camera, breaking the fourth wall for the first time, her gaze piercing and direct. "Never let anyone tell you who you are, and never, ever let them think they've won before the game is over." If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more. It really helps us out. Now, I have a question for you. Do you think Grant's punishment was enough, or did he deserve a harsher sentence for what he did to his family? Let me know in the comments below.